This is the true story of the 1996 film Scream. It happened on August 24th, 1990, so 6 years before the movie, when two University of Florida students lost their lives. Their names were Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, and they were both only 17 years old. Now, from what the police were able to determine, someone broke into the girl's apartment very early in the morning. Then the intruder walked into Christina's bedroom and stabbed her. And then he continued to slash her repeatedly until she died. It took Christina less than a minute to die of her injuries. Sonia was still asleep at this point, but she woke when she heard the distinct sound of duct tape being ripped off a roll. But the stranger overpowered her long enough to tape her hands together. He cut off her clothes, he sexually assaulted her, the attacker made Sonia roll over onto her stomach, and he stabbed her 5 times in the back. He actually then mutilated Christina and Sonia's bodies. He cut off some of their flesh and took it with him. He also posed their remains. It was a way to ensure that once the police found the crime scene, they would know that this was an intentional, gruesome, disgusting murder. And sadly, the violence didn't end there. The very next night, Krista Hoyt was out having fun. It was close to 11 a.m. when she finally got home. And the moment she stepped into her apartment, she could tell that something was wrong. There was a sliding glass door that she kept closed and locked, but now it was open. She felt an arm wrap around her neck. It was the same man who had killed Sonia and Christina just the night before. He worked quickly, just like before. He overpowered her, then used duct tape to gag and restrain her. The man wrestled her into the bedroom, and that's where he sexually assaulted her and stabbed her. The man also mutilated her body the same way he did the other two. He cut off Krista's head and set it on her bookshelf. There had been 3 murders in 2 days on this college campus. All of the victims were students of the University of Florida, which is why news reports gave the unidentified killer a nickname, the Gainesville Ripper. Then came Monday, the 27th. That night, 23-year-old Manny Taboda was asleep, which he shared with his 23-year-old roommate, Tracy Paulus. This obviously didn't stop the Gainesville Ripper from breaking in. He crept into Manny's room and then stabbed him while he was asleep. Still, he did make a lot of noise while he was fighting the Gainesville Ripper, and it was loud enough to wake Tracy. So she got out of bed and walked toward Manny's room to see what was going on. Right away, she turned and ran. She made it all the way to her bedroom, where she closed and locked the door. Now, unfortunately, the Ripper had spotted her when she had walked in to Manny's room. So the Gainesville Ripper marched from Manny's room to Tracy's locked door, and he rammed his shoulder against it until it broke down. From there, Tracy's final moments played out just like the other victims had. By the time he was done, Tracy and Manny were both dead, and they were now the 4th and 5th victims in this rampage. The police were doing everything they could to try and solve these horrible crimes. But the problem was that the killer was good at covering his tracks. He never left behind any fingerprints or any other physical evidence hinting at his identity. Except after Manny and Tracy's murders, the Ripper's spree stopped. As the weeks went on, forensic investigators tried to analyze the crime scenes, but they still didn't know the most important detail, and that was who he was. Then, the Gainesville police got a tip that just raised the stakes even more. See, a few days after the murders, some officers from Shreveport, Louisiana reached out to the Gainesville PD. They thought the Ripper may have been connected to even more unsolved murder cases from their town. So now let's go back to November of 1989, about 10 months before that spree in Florida. On the 4th, someone broke into a home that was shared by 3 people: 55-year-old Tim Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter, Julie, and his 8-year-old son, Sean. The home intruder killed all 3 of them and mutilated and posed the bodies afterward. The officers thought this can't be a coincidence. Maybe these crimes had all been committed by the same person. The different departments compiled the genetic evidence they had. There was just enough of it to compare with the samples the Shreveport officers had gathered from the triple murder scene. By January of 1991, the investigators confirmed that the murders had all been committed by the same person. And not only that, the officers were finally actually able to determine the killer's identity. He already had a criminal record and had been arrested before. While the officers were learning all of this information, they got another useful tip. It was from a woman who had lived in Shreveport at the time of Tom, Julie, and Sean's murders. She knew of a neighbor who had always seemed just a bit aggressive and violent, and he had left town right before the killing spree in Gainesville. The investigators didn't have to track him down or figure out where he had fled to after the Gainesville murders because they already knew where he was. He was sitting in jail in Marion County, Florida, and he was facing charges that had nothing to do with the killing spree. His name was Danny Harold Rolling. One night when he was young, Danny witnessed a horrific crime. And his grandfather and grandmother started fighting, and the grandfather actually became so angry that he picked a knife up, and then with his free hand, he grabbed his wife by the hair and began sawing at her neck with the knife. This was also when he began to be sexually aggressive against the girls and women that he knew. He got caught spying on a neighbor girl. Of course, she told her parents, who talked to Danny's father, and then his father beat him up. So as soon as Danny turned 18, he tried to enlist with the military, but Danny only lasted a short while before he quit. And that's when his life of crime actually began. And during this time, Danny also got married. He was physically abusive against that wife. Eventually, she leaves him. He tracked down a stranger who resembled his former wife and raped her. It all culminated on November 4th, 1989, when Danny crossed the line and became an actual murderer. The police still weren't sure why he chose to target these three people or what his motives were. By now, the investigators understood that Danny was driven by anger. In May of 1990, Danny got fired from his job. That same night, he went back home, and the moment Danny saw his father, who lived with him at this point, he fired twice. He didn't pause to see if his dad was okay or bother to call an ambulance. He just turned and walked away, leaving his father to die. On August 27th, the same day he killed Tracy and Manny, Danny actually robbed a bank in Gainesville, and he got away with a big wad of cash. Now, later that evening, police were actually patrolling the area. They were on edge after all of the murders. So when an officer saw Danny creeping through the trees, he immediately ordered Danny to stop. Well, Danny does not surrender. He breaks into a run. The officer chased him all the way back to the tent. That's when they find the stolen money. But in the moment, the police officer had no idea that Danny was even connected to the murders. He thought that he had just found the bank robber, which was why he found himself sitting in a jail cell 4 months later in January of 1991. And before long, Danny admits what he had done. He says, "Yeah, I'm the Gainesville Ripper." Now, Danny's trial was scheduled for February of 1994, and he was facing 5 counts of murder. Ultimately, rather than fight these charges, Danny actually pled guilty. Danny had traumatized the entire community of Gainesville. They tuned in whenever the nightly news did a story about the case. They bought papers, they gossiped about it, and this included an aspiring writer named Kevin Williamson. Now, as soon as he heard about Danny's killing spree, he realized it would make a pretty good scary movie. So he wrote a screenplay for the film that we now know as Scream. And in the meanwhile, Danny remained on death row. He filed a number of appeals, all of which got rejected. According to Danny, during his killing spree, he believes now that he had been possessed by a demon. At one point, he announced he was going to write a book on what he had done. He continued to maintain that he had multiple personalities. Danny actually said he was just as horrified by the murders he'd committed as everyone else. And Danny was executed on October 25th, 2006. But no matter what people say or how they talk about the situation, it is impossible to deny that Danny left his mark. There is rumors of hauntings at the places where he committed the murders. However, the spookiest stories are about Danny's childhood home. According to current residents, they have experienced a lot of paranormal activity there for years. They say that sometimes they hear bumps and other noises in rooms that are supposed to be empty. Other times, objects seem to move on their own. Ultimately, you got to decide what you choose to believe. But I will say, at this time of year, when Halloween is just around the corner, it's easier than ever to accept that pure evil may just really exist.